Good evening. Today is November 5th. It's about 5:50 in the afternoon, and this is the Streets and Sidewalks Committee. We're here to hear a staff recommendation, but the committee is made up of Councilman Brockheath to my left and Councilwoman Lindsley to my right, and I am Bob Phillips, the chair. We're going to hear a report on the Planning Commission vacation of a 10-foot wide alley, which is located off of Cherry Street south of West Main Street. And Mr. Titterington, are you going to start this, or is Mrs. Rose?
I can start it. If you have any technical questions, Jill is available. It's fairly straightforward. We did receive a petition. If you read the Planning Commission report, there was one question about an owner that was adjacent who had not signed the petition. They have subsequently signed it, no problems whatsoever. So it's a fairly streamlined process at this point. The property, you have a map in your packet that shows the location of the alley, and we certainly have no issues with vacating that alley to the benefit of the adjacent property owners, and we are not asking for emergency legislation.
Excuse me. The vacation itself, is it going, the entire width of the alley, is it going to one of the property owners, or will there be a small portion carved out for anyone else?
What ultimately happens is between the property owners, but by law the vacation will be divided in half, and that portion will go to each adjacent property owner on either side. Our understanding is there may be some side agreement, but we're not party to that, the specifics of that.
Okay. And as you indicated, all of the property owners affected have been notified and or signed off
agreement. Yes.
On the agreement.
That's correct.
Okay. Excellent. I don't believe I have any other questions, either one of you two.
No, I think that answered my question.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, one additional. Was this at our behest, we start this process, or did the property owners request it?
The property owners had talked about it. I think it was kind of a mutual thing, since if you know what the alley is, it goes in and out, and there are some properties that use it, and it's been quite a while. I'm not sure if we initiated or not, but it was with their assent, and they may have asked us how do we proceed with it. So it was joint.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. Any other council folks here, sitting up here, have any questions?
A question.
Yes, Mr. Twilliger.
Is there a possibility that those residents or those locations on the inside could in fact become landlocked in some way if the persons on the extremes have issues?
No, there would be no landlocking. There's public right-of-way in each direction. You'll see that the properties to the north, or the north of the alley, abut West Main Street, for example. Does that answer your question?
Yep. Mrs. Oda, go ahead, please.
Is there a plan for the alley, or does it remain alley-like?
Our understanding is it would remain alley-like. Not sure that's in the ORC, but yeah.
Alley-esque.
I don't believe anybody wants to build into the alley. They just want to be able to use it as part of their operations.
And so then the city doesn't have to keep it cleared. It becomes their property.
Well, as soon as it's vacated and becomes their property, then we don't have any responsibilities for it.
Thank you.
And the property owner they are responsible for surveying and establishing their property lines?
That's already been done.
The vacation will establish the property line.
Got it. Okay. Mrs. Baker, Mr. Kendall, will either of you two have any questions? Okay. Anyone else in the audience have any questions? All right. This is not an emergency?
That's correct.
Okay. We have your decision.
Yeah, I say move forward.
Okay. All right. It is the unanimous decision of the committee to move forward as the staff has recommended. Do we have another item?
Yes.
We have a professional services agreement.
That's yours too, okay. You threw me off with this 545 stuff. So.
Sorry.
We are asking that you authorize me to enter into an agreement with Wolpert to perform actually the remainder of a parking and traffic study, an expanded traffic and parking study downtown at a cost not to exceed $60,000. Originally, this project, this work was less than the $50,000 threshold. We received an analysis and some recommendations from Wolpert related to the parking analysis and the traffic patterns, et cetera. And when we had a discussion, we realized that we wanted to dive into several sections of their recommendations in much more detail than we had originally anticipated. And so they had not provided us with a quote for that original work. You see from the report, we'd like some case study research done so that we can look at some best practices related to particularly the residential parking programs, because our informal census that we, in partnership with the Troy Main Street organization, is showing that, as I think you're well aware, we do have quite a bit of second and third story apartment living, and that is continuing to grow. When we talk to the downtown property owners and some of the developers that are specialized in the downtown, there's a lot of demand, and we expect that is going to continue to grow. We want some more detailed traffic counts and data analysis of our primary intersections before we would consider making any changes to the stoplights and the configuration and the timing, et cetera. And what that would involve is not only just physically doing the counts, but then running some hypothetical simulations so that we can see, based on those counts, based on the traffic demand, how any reconfiguration might work. What we want to make sure that we would get that right the first time, and not have to reverse course, kind of like what we did with the fountain flow, traffic flow in the roundabout 15 or 20 years ago, whenever that was, 15 years ago, I guess. And then you'll see some other work that we want them to do. Well, that takes them to an estimated not to exceed number of 60,000, 10,000 over the council authorization limit. Originally, when we awarded this contract to Wolpert, we did solicit other bids, and so even though we didn't go to council and run a formal process for professional services like you do under the Ohio Revised Code, we did have a robust evaluation that we did of several of the contractors before we landed on Wolpert.
Is there any ability to tie in with the Troy Main Street study, the MKSK? I believe
MKSK study is not going to involve this kind of work. There may be some ability for us to share data from this study with them. They're just now getting started, so there's really can't be any data shared from them to us, timing-wise. We are asking that since they've done a lot of the work and we're nearing the end of the year, that you consider this as emergency legislation. The engineering budgets do have sufficient funds to handle this.
The only thing I didn't get from this, even though the scope is fairly well described here, but what is the physical boundaries that we're looking at?
Basically the downtown area, so I'd say roughly, although maybe a little bit longer, out here at Franklin Street, north to Water Street, east to Mulberry, and west to probably the Cherry Street area.
Any it's not specifically enumerated here or outlined, but parking, is that even taking into consideration looking at a parking structure, facility, or anything?
They have already mentioned in their preliminary work that they've done a parking structure. When they analyzed and surveyed all of the parking gaps, if you will, they found that there are very narrow gaps depending on the day of the week, particularly related to the county court activity, and that is your pinch points. Other than that, if you're willing to walk a block or two, there is parking there. It's been a while since I looked at the reports, but they were not impressed with the need for a parking structure.
Any other questions from
I think that answers
either?
Yeah, I think I just have one question. This study itself is not disrupting traffic flow or anything. It's all off. They're not actually going to get down there and
Yeah, they're not going to be standing in the middle of the
Stand there
road
and
and
flagging people.
Right. No.
Okay, gotcha. Perfect. Thank you.
You bet. Mrs. Baker, Mr. Kendall, questions? Mrs. Zoto?
Patrick, can you explain a little bit what the conversion from 4 lanes to 3 lanes on Main and Market, what that's talking about?
That relates to when you're coming from the east, when they did the last section of streetscape, and they narrowed it from 4 lanes down to 3 as you can't come into the roundabout from the Olive Oasis
On the other
area
side.
coming in.
As you're westbound.
They did that where they put in a drop lane. They narrowed it down to 1 lane in each direction and have a drop lane in. It works very well on that area, or on that side. We're not yet convinced that could work on the other 3 sides because the volume of traffic is higher,
It's higher on those.
at least on 2, if not the 3rd as well.
Okay.
So we want them to look into that a little bit more.
I knew some people that like that.
Works very well on the east side, but then again, the traffic is the volume is less.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I did have one question. Mr. Titterton, you said only going west as far as Cherry Street?
Probably yes.
I mean, our parking lot is on Cherry Street. And that's the very edge of where the study is.
Yeah, and when I said the boundaries are a little fluid, the traffic portion of it would be at Cherry East. When you're talking about the parking, we are looking in an expanded area as far as our parking lots and our parking on-street parking as well. We're going all the way out to the courthouse and actually a little beyond to consider the parking side of it. Yes.
I understand that.
Yes, Mr. Kendall. Please approach, please.
State your name and address.
Wasn't going to ask, but I got to ask this. Just have we had good luck with Wolpert? Because I've been on a couple of organizations that we've used Wolpert, and the results that we got from them was, I'm sorry, not the best. That we had to redo a lot of the work.
I want to mute kind of what you said, since we don't want to target one specific firm. That happens from time to time with every firm, I suppose. And this study, they've done a thorough job. The lead engineer on this project is a local person, and so we benefited from his familiarity of the area. We've added work to them as we've gone along and asked more questions, and so it's taken longer. I don't blame them for that necessarily. And what we've received, we've been confident enough in what they've given us that we've wanted to go to the next step, which is why we're here tonight.
All right, thank you. Like I said, I hate to bring it up, but I just had to ask that question.
Well, I'll follow up on that question because it's important to have confidence in the sub or contractors that we're having do analysis of any area of the city. But is our engineer's office, are you part of the decision-making process with the picking of of things like this, that you're confident in whoever we do settle with?
Yes. I could say no. Yes, yes. We're a part of this process.
Okay.
So.
All right. Okay. Any additional questions, comments? Okay. What is your feeling on this?
Move forward with emergency.
Emergency.
Okay. All right. It is the unanimous decision of the committee to proceed as recommended by staff with the report and as an emergency. Any other items to come before the Streets and Sidewalks Committee? Okay. Then we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.